Hi everyone, and welcome to our CXPA Expert Hangout. My name is Leslie Pagel, and I'm filling in for Leslie Likens, who's out on her Navy Reserve responsibilities this week. For those of you that are new to the Hangout, the CXPA hosts a series of Hangouts each month with our CXPA experts. The 9 CXPA experts are available to answer member questions on a regular basis, but they also participate in these Hangouts to share their expertise. Our topic today is one of the 6 competencies for the CCXP certification. The topic is metrics, measurement, and ROI, and I'm thrilled to be joined with 3 of the 9 CXPA experts. Allow me to introduce you to Lynn Hunsaker.
Hello,
Yvonne.
how are you today?
Great. We have Yvonne Nomizu.
Hi.
And Jim Rembach.
Howdy.
Thank you all for joining. As we kick off, I'd like to remind everyone that you can post your questions. If you're following this broadcast on Google+, you can post your questions in the comments field. Or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can post your questions on Twitter using the hashtag CXPA Hangout. Now let's get started. Let's start with the question around CX metrics. Lynn, there's a lot of discussion around CX metrics, and there are a lot of metrics out there, like NPS, loyalty, ACSI. It goes on, and sometimes it can be confusing. Is there a perfect metric? Or what, maybe the better question is, what should customer experience professionals consider when determining which metric they use to measure the experience? Lynn, what do you think?
Well, you're talking about a measurement that represents what customers are telling you in feedback. It's basically a voice of the customer measure, and it actually should be customized to what's best for your company. For example, if you work in an industry that doesn't have opportunities for customers to recommend to their colleagues, then maybe it doesn't make sense to make that a focus. However, if if that is meaningful to the executives and your culture, then go with that. But I think that you need to do a cultural introspection to understand what applies in your organization and then adapt that way. Now, one of the key things is that when you're measuring customer feedback, it's something that customers already experienced. And so you have to keep in mind that all of those metrics about voice of the customer are lagging indicators of customer experience. And what I recommend doing is actually focusing on leading indicators as your primary goal, with the lagging indicator as a secondary goal. And what that would be as a leading indicator is your action plans on the voice of the customer. And that's how you get that customer metric to change.
Great. Yvonne, let's talk about the ROI of customer experience. Is there a broader set of business metrics such as revenue, customer lifetime value, or customer acquisition rate that should be targets for customer experience efforts? And can these be linked to a customer experience measure?
You know, I agree with Lynn that there are, metrics out the wazoo, and that you have to really think about what your own business model is. I like to say that CX experts need to be trilingual, that they need to really have empathy and understanding of what a human being goes through in terms of a customer experience. They need to speak operations, because most of the company is running an operation. And then the third one is they need to understand the financial metrics of the company. So yes, I think it's critical that CX gets linked to ultimate business results. In some cases, it's about profits. In some cases, it's about market share. One of the ways I think to link what people ultimately value in a customer experience and a business metric is through the avenue of what I call behavior and change. Because if you think about what you're really trying to do with a customer experience, besides make people happy and be loyal, is you're trying to drive behavior. So all of marketing and all of product strategy and all of that is about driving customer choice. They choose to stay with you. They choose to buy that second product. They choose to make a referral. And so I think if you can have some kind of metric around how well are we doing driving that choice or driving that behavior, and measure that, that's sort of a bridge between customer experience and the ultimate business metric. So loyalty means more people stay with you for X number of years. Customer acquisition means the rate at which you're growing customers grows at this rate. So I highly recommend that customer experience things be linked somehow to behavior or choice, and then that gives you the bridge to link to some kind of business metric.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jim, if we're going to achieve the outcomes that Yvonne talked about, then people need to take action on the customer intelligence. What advice do you have for customer experience professionals who might be facing some challenges on getting customer feedback and customer intelligence into the hands of the people that need it, get their attention, and get them to prompt action and use the information that they receive?
Well, to start, let me ask, Yvonne, what is a wazoo? Is that a business term? Actually, you did say another key word besides the wazoo, because definitely we have data and metrics coming out all over the place, but that word was choice, okay? And so when you start thinking about choice, emotions go into choice. And there's a few things I want to share, and I'll make these available to anybody that wants to use them in a PowerPoint presentation, but it's the kind of the difference between knowledge and the difference between wisdom, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is knowledge is knowing to bake at 375. Wisdom is knowing to preheat the frickin' oven, okay?
Frickin', what's that? I never heard that.
That's another technical term right beside wazoo. The other thing is knowledge is knowing the CX metrics. Wisdom is not thinking there is one perfect one. There is no such thing as a perfect CX metric. The other thing is knowing that metrics are important, but wisdom is not presenting them first. And I'll talk about that in a second. Because here's the thing that I really want people to focus on, is that knowledge is knowing you need buy-in, but wisdom is not omitting its cultivation. Yvonne talked about choice. There's a recent study that was actually conducted by David DeSteno at Northeastern University that talks about choice and how people actually go through that decision-making process. And what they did is they put study participants into 3 different states: grateful, happy, and neutral. And what they found is that people made significantly better decisions that weren't driven by their emotions when they were put in a state of being grateful or appreciative. And appreciative is some of the work that I focus on. It's based in positive psychology about appreciative inquiry. If you actually do the job of cultivating your organization and the people who you need to buy in through the appreciative process, you're actually going to get them to change more. Now, I'm not talking that you're going to go from night to day. However, you're going to get some impact and effect in areas that you can grow upon that will allow you to grow and create more. So focusing in on choice and how to drive choice through appreciation is really the thing that CX experts need to focus on. It's not presenting the metrics first. It's creating and cultivating the ground and doing it through appreciation.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. Lynn, I'm going to touch on something that you talked about earlier around a cultural introspection. I think you referred to it as in terms of determining the metrics that you use. What advice do you have for customer experience professionals on kind of looking internally at their culture and learning from that and identifying which metrics they should focus on?
I think that the main thing is changing behavior, driving behavior, not necessarily changing, but driving people's choice to behave in the way that is necessary for customer experience excellence and the business results that are needed through customer experience excellence. I noticed that Yvonne was talking about the behavior driving, and I think she was talking about customer engagement primarily, I think that the customer engagement happens a lot more easily if you have achieved the employee engagement in acting on customer feedback in the first place. So it just is a bit of common sense to know that if people are giving you feedback about something that needs to be corrected, then people inside the company need to be engaged to make that correction. And then it follows that if you've made that correction, you will have the customer engagement. So I would advocate creating a dashboard that shows that transition, that flow from voice of the customer to internal actions on that, and then the external engagement. And when you show those things side by side, you have a more holistic view. So when we're talking about cultural introspection, I'm really talking about what is going to motivate your executives and your employee base. Something that's really simple, something that's more complicated, something that everyone is doing, something that you're creating customized. It doesn't really matter what everybody else thinks about it. It's mostly about what is going to help your company make the progress that it needs to.
Mm-hmm. Which ties to Jim's input around being appreciative and starting with the story and not the metric.
Exactly. I think we're all singing the same song here.
Absolutely.
Well, if I could, one example, having been in the hotel business, what we, it's very simple. I think simple language and getting people to understand, appreciate is important. When, you had a guest come into the hotel and had a really hard time dealing with making this guest happy, we used to say, let's get through that, and then we used to tell stories around, guess what, that guest came back again. You know what, that same guest came back 5 times this year. And behind that is what we're saying is we created a culture, an employee way of behavior, and some goals that said that's a great thing that we saw that guy come back 5 times a year. If you add that all up, what that is customer retention. So then it ultimately ties to some business metric up in the sky on someone's executive dashboard. But at the lower levels, we just, we tell the stories of he came back again, he was here 5 times. And then you feel empowered as an employee because you were part of making that happen. So I agree with somewhere in the back, upstairs turns into a metric, but it's making it feel real at the employee level.
Yeah.
Well, and definitely the opportunity is to make it feel more real at the C level, because they can often dictate what it is that we end up behaving like and behaving for down at the front line level. And so a lot of that ground cultivation has to be at the front end. And when you start talking about metrics, emotion does take over for a lot of financial people when it comes to metrics. They say, hey, that number went down, and they get upset, and then therefore their emotion takes over in their next decision. And that's where you have to actually need to feed them more appreciation so that they say, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't be upset at the number. I need to really focus here and make the right decision, which may be an investment in CX.
Les, one of the things that helped our culture was that we had this mantra: good news is no news is bad news, and bad news is good news, which helped us welcome those kinds of things that could potentially have strong negative emotion inside. We knew we were hot. We didn't need to have people telling us how hot we were. I mean, we'd love to hear it, but I mean, good news was no news, but bad news was good news.
Yep. That's a good way of looking at it. Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time out today to focus on the topic of metrics, measurement, and ROI. Appreciate your time and appreciate everyone who tuned in live to the broadcast. If you'd like a copy of this, we will be posting this on the CXPA YouTube site, so you could see a recording of it. I'd also suggest checking out cxpa.org for other resources on this topic and for other upcoming events such as CX Day, which is October 7th. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you later.
And
Bye.
if you would like the slides on the quotes, just send me a LinkedIn connection, and I'll send those to you, as well as the information on that study from Northeastern about appreciation and gratefulness.
Great. Thanks, Jim.